back to another episode of UAP Studies. My name is Jason Gilmet, and I'm joined by Louis Borges again, or as he's been recently dubbed, Gorgeous Borges. So how are you doing today, Louis?
I'm doing very good, brother. Thanks again for having me on the show. I'm super excited about our guest. He's very well versed in the field, a lot of years of experience. Again, he's another guest that meets our caliber of what we think are the real deal in the world of ufology. And yeah, I'll throw it back to you. Let's intro and maybe talk a little bit about the history of our today's guest.
Perfect. So today we have Malcolm Robinson, who's joining us from Scotland, and he's the assistant editor of the Outer Limits magazine. He's been a founder of the Strange Phenomenon Investigation, which started back in 1979. Malcolm is also a well-known Scottish author of books on the paranormal and UFO topics. He's an established speaker, presenter, scriptwriter, and authored many books on UFOs and the paranormal, such as UFO Case Files in Scotland, Volume 1 and 2, The Monster of Loch Ness, The Paranormal Case Files of Great Britain, Volume 1, 2, and 3, and the Detchmont Wood UFO incident as well, which is one that we haven't covered much on the podcast, but is a crucial incident that took place. So I'd like to welcome you to the podcast, Malcolm. How are you doing, sir?
Yes, it's a pleasure to be on your podcast. I'm very well, sir. Very well indeed. Nice to be on.
Great. So one of the things that we always ask our guests is basically we all have origin stories, something that triggered the UFO interest in somebody. What age were you at when the UFO subject took hold of you?
Wow, probably, well, I was very, very young. I'd probably be about maybe 8 or 9 years of age, And from throughout growing up in my childhood, I've had a number of very, very strange and paranormal experiences. And, as I grew older, I decided that I wanted to learn more about these fascinating subjects. But I was very, very skeptical. I honestly felt that there were no validity to claims pertaining to ghosts, poltergeists, UFOs. And way back in 1979, I started out on a one-man crusade to prove what a load of nonsense it was. However, there's no smoke without fire. And whilst, yes, there are a lot of nonsense out there, not at all. There is enough substantial, wonderful cases of UFO sightings, of close proximity sightings, ghost poltergeists, that I knew that, hey, we are onto something here. And like I said, in 1979, we formed SPI to look at all claims pertaining to all the wonderful, bizarre world of the UFOs and the unexplained. It's been a wonderful journey, a terrific journey.
Beautiful. And as far as activity in Great Britain, you have as much activity as Canada and the United States, but we don't seem to hear about it too much unless it's a massive case. How often are sightings occurring in Great Britain?
Well, in Great Britain as a whole, we still have a wealth of UFO reports, and more so in Scotland as well. There's a small town called Bonnybridge in Stirlingshire in central Scotland, which has seen a rise of UFO reports from 1992 till present day. I've investigated this with a local provost, Councillor Billy Buchanan, who was previously a councillor, he's now a provost. And we've done a lot of work in the Bonnybridge area. There's sightings throughout Scotland which demand explanation. We're talking about low-level, close proximity sightings, sightings that you could almost throw a stone at. We have the large black triangular shaped craft slowly moving across the Scottish skies as well. And these are perplexing because as a researcher, my job is to find out if there's a natural explanation to account for any given sighting. We do that through checking with the police. Do the police have anybody phoning in with members of the public seeing the same thing? We check with the local airports, the national airports, local flying clubs, the Ministry of Defence. We tend to dot the I's and cross the T's to try and reach a normal conclusion. And the vast majority of UFO reports, as high as 95%, have an actual explanation. 5% remain. 3% of the 5 could be our own black budget technology. As we know, the stealth aircraft was flying in American skies for a good number of years before the American Air Force put their hands up and said, it's ours. That gave rise to many false UFO reports. So we have to be very, very careful that what we're seeing in the skies is not our own black budget technology. Now, the 2% that remains from that 1% could be a rare new atmospheric phenomena, something akin to ball lightning or something. The 1%, the fly in the ointment for me, personally, and my colleagues, is we are absolutely dealing with some form of non-human intelligence that's always been with us. It's been here since mankind was on the planet. We see it in the cave paintings, etc. We see it in Renaissance paintings, in the artwork, etc. Big question though is, if they have been here for so long, why? But in Scotland, we have some wonderful cases that I'd love to tell your good self and your listeners.
Absolutely, yeah. You feel free. This is your time for sure to talk about this stuff.
Okay, what I would like to say first and foremost, you mentioned earlier about, basically what was the first case that got me off the skeptical fence, or what got me interested in it. It would be 1979. Now, the story may well be known to some of your viewers and listeners, but I'll tell it again. 1979, I was only about 19 years of age, so that's gone back a bit. And what happened was, it was a local forester, a chap called Robert Taylor. He was employed by the Livingston Development Corporation in the forestry department. And his job was to ensure that no cattle or sheep strayed into the woods. Very, very mundane job. He had no interest at all in UFOs, flying saucers. He was an educated man. He fought in the Second World War. He helped liberate Belsen-Bergen, the concentration camp, where he was a young man. So now he's older, mundane job, walking through the woods with his Irish red setter dog Lara, walking down this forestry path, came upon a clearing. Oh my God, what is that? He described this large dome-shaped object with a flange going around its perimeter, with cross-like projections sticking up from the flange, and it disappeared and reappeared, solidified and desolidified, and he's never seen anything like this in his life. And his dog is barking furiously. Then, as if this scene couldn't get any more stranger, it did. For what resembled two Second World War sea mines. These bobbin mines that floated in the North Atlantic with the spikes sticking out a bit?
Right.
Resembled that. Two of them dropped down from this craft that was hovering about 40 feet above this grass, dropped down and impacted on the grass and started rolling across the grass towards him. He's like this, what is going on here? Then he stopped. Then they projected these rod-like projections towards his person and pulled him very, very forcibly towards this larger object. At that point, he remembers a horrible burning smell pervading the whole area, and then a swishing sound, and then he lost consciousness. When he regained consciousness, the larger object was gone, the smaller objects were gone, and there were over 40 holes and impressions in the grass in front of him. He had a nasty graze under his chin, he had a graze on his head, he had a pounding headache, and he managed to stagger back to his pickup truck, which was near the woods. And he tried to radio base for help, but he couldn't speak. He had lost his voice. So he managed somehow to reverse the truck into a ditch. He couldn't move the truck. He managed to get back home to his wife, and his wife, when she's, what's happened to you? Because her husband, his jersey was all muddy. He said, I've been attacked. Attacked? Attacked by who? By men? No, by a spaceship thing. And she says, look, come in, there's no such thing. But then she went, well, I know my husband. My husband would never make up a tall tale like this. So she phoned the local doctor. The local doctor came down to the house, checked his heart, his lungs, etc. He was very excited. And then Malcolm Drummond, his forestry boss, came down, and both men went up to the woods. There you go. There's all the marks in the grass. Now, this is where the police The Scottish police became involved because it was deemed as an assault by person or persons unknown, a physical assault. The police looked at the grass. Wow, yeah, they're no denying that. Fenced off the area. I became involved. I saw the marks on the grass myself. We interviewed Bob several times. I interviewed the police, etc. And today it stands the test of time as one of the most bizarre cases in Scotland. Now, one thing I should say to yourself is the trousers that Robert Taylor wore were ripped. Ripped. These were tested, forensically tested by the science lab at Edinburgh. And the chief scientist said, Malcolm, these trousers were pulled in an upwards manner. They were not made by any forest debris. They were not made by sharp stones or sharp twigs. These were clearly made in a pulling upwards manner. Now, these were heavy duty material, you know, very, very thick trousers. Yeah. 1993, we placed a stone cairn there with a brass plaque to commemorate that event. And a few years ago, I managed to get signage placed because people were coming from all over the world we couldn't find it. It's such a big, we just can't find it. So I managed to get signage placed by the local council, UFO this way, and we had big signage at the plaque, at the area as well. It's a wonderful case. And his dog never, ever went back to that area again, never ventured near that. That's just one of many cases in Scotland that, you know, it proves that we're dealing with something real, something tangible. Now, like anything else, people, skeptics, we love them. We wouldn't be here without them. Skeptics had ideas what it could be. One skeptic said, could have not been a tropa belladonna. Now, that's a poisonous berry, which ingested with any deep quantity can cause hallucinations or even death. There is no evidence of that plant that being in Decmont Woods at all, none at all. And as I say, I had to write a standalone book about that case, the Decmont Woods incident, because it just deserved people's attention. And as I say, wonderful case.
That's amazing. Malcolm, I wanted to ask you about the recent movie that you starred in, the Pentagon UFO Files. And to start, I found it fascinating that it took a UK media company to give us a film entitled The Pentagon UFO Files. But in this movie, and for those who haven't seen it yet, I do recommend it. And we don't promote many things often, but if we've personally seen it and, you know, like it, we will give it our seal of approval, so to speak. Not that it's worth anything, but I really enjoyed it. It does go over the, you know, December 2017 New York Times article about the ATIP videos. We've had a lot of people on our show, you know, Sean Cahill, Kevin Day, firsthand experiencers that were on the USS Princeton, right at the time that this Nimitz thing was happening. We've had forensic scientists that have given us, you know, specific data, telemetry, you know, guys that were watching these things on radar. But the thing I enjoyed was that you kind of gave the full chronology and filled in some gaps that we didn't even get ourselves on the North American end of this. You know, we're a lot closer to where this story launched. But, you know, you mentioned Senator Harry Reid was made aware either through a leak or otherwise, but was made aware that there were some sightings happening with the Navy pilots. And I think because of that, the government started taking it more seriously because now we got military people breaking silence. It's easy to discredit some nut out in the field in a farmland and say he doesn't know what he saw. But when it's your own military people, and then, you know, there's the whole idea of the threat narrative. So I'll ask you, you know, what went into making that movie? What made you guys want to do it? And what about this whole story do you find interesting?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously I was invited to go to London. I was staying in Scotland at the time, invited to go to London to be part of a team of a few British ufologists, one of whom was, of course, Philip Mantle, a very dear and good friend of mine. And we were invited to go to London to provide our thoughts about what we thought was happening here with these wonderful sightings, the Tic Tac, Gimbal, Go Fast, these objects that was seen by American Air Force pilots. And it was just a case of really just sitting down and giving our own views, our own thoughts about what we felt here in the UK, because it's a massive an American case. It's simply incredible when we think about the fact that they had this report, this big report that came out. There was a lot more pages of the report that we haven't as yet seen, and I'd love to see those final pages. And since then, we've obviously had more sightings come out from various people as well. So it provided that opportunity for myself, Philip Mantle, and Phil Kinsella, Jason Gleaves, Paul Askoff, just to tell people what we believe was going on. And as you probably, for those who haven't obviously saw this footage, and I dare say that there can't be that many, we're dealing here with either two things. A, it's our own technology. And our own technology was masquerading to see what this exercise, all these ships that was taking part in this exercise. So this could have been American, it could have been Canadian, to see how they would react. And which is fanciful, which is airy-fairy. That's possibility number one. I mean, it could have been the Russians, it could have been a Russian experiment, Chinese, etc. We have to think about this. No matter how preposterous this sounds, we have to look out the box to see, well, who else, if it's not American, who else could be doing this? So the other option is that it clearly is off-world, because the G-force involved, the speeds involved is absolutely terrific. And if we have that technology, why aren't we using that technology in some theatres of war or whatever, or just normal transport, just to get people from A to B much more quicker? So I tend to think, and I could be wrong, I tend to think it's not our own. I don't think it's our own technology at all. I think it is off-world. I think it is something else. And again, it doesn't provide us an explanation. It doesn't give us an answer. It doesn't, what's going on here. And we just don't know. We just really don't know. But I'm glad that documentary was made, because it was well put together. People like myself who work with the media, we're always hopeful that they will showcase ourselves and the subject in a nice, correct light. A lot of times they don't. It's all just wishy-washy, and it's just not presented very well. But I was very, very pleased by my participation in the Pentagon UFO Files, and it was just a great opportunity just to say to the British public and the American public, Canadian public, and everybody in Europe, have a look at this. This is incredible.
With ufology, I always find it funny because it's possibility versus probability. Is it possible that it's the Russian and Chinese? Yes, it's possible. Is it possibly that? It's like, no, I don't think that it is them. The way that the characteristics, the way that they fly, the lack of interactions between the American and Russia is having the same issues that the Americans are with these things. So is China. China has started their own UAP task force, for crying out loud. So it shows that it's a global issue. And they're thinking, is it the Americans? Is it the Russians? Like, they're thinking the same thing that we're thinking on this side, right? We know it's not Canada, because Canada has absolutely no budget for military whatsoever or experimental stuff. And if it was Canada, there'd be a big Canadian flag on the Tic Tac or something like that, right? We'd be so proud.
Nobody's playing with experimental footage. And we've had plenty of military people on this show, that said, listen, we would never, that's how friendly fire happens, and that's how people die. And that's the best way to blow your cover on a black budget project, which is that's the end all be all, is don't let this get out. So they're not playing with this technology over highly populated cities and while other people don't know the training's happening. The military, bar down, does not do that ever, anywhere. And it's an offense to your own troops that, like, we don't trust you enough to know that we're running covert operations. Covert operations all the time happen when you're told, hey, don't go in there, don't ask about this. You're just like, okay, yeah, it could be something very mundane and not life-changing, but they're just used to, if you're told you don't ask or you don't need to know this, that's just par for the course. Even on, other things that are like shift change times or standard operations on the boat, they do have some compartmentalization. So, that's not the big thing. The big thing for me is the characteristics. the
Yeah.
speeds, the apparent G-forces. We interviewed some of the cast from A Tear in the Sky, which is a new movie that just came out. One of them being Dave Mason, and he's a brilliant engineer and scientist, inventor, and they essentially caught raining Tic Tacs, similar to what happened in the USS Nimitz video. And like he's very good with photography. He knows how to do the trigonometry with the angles and the field of view and how far away it is. And basically, he said that what they caught was a raining tic tac, went from suborbital into the water. Speeds were ranging from 8,000 miles an hour to 84,000 miles an hour. And I mean, when you look at these things on FLIR, and I mean, the Tic Tac footage is an infrared shot. You can see right on the gunner footage, it says IR in the top. So again, this doesn't appear to the normal naked eye in that spectrum. But when you see what it's doing, how cold it is, there's no propulsion, there's no heat, not even the friction is registering as something causing heat. So it's so beyond our potential, just as beings to be in a machine. Would we be able to do that? And the G-force alone would kill you, not to mention, the erratic changes in direction and everything else. So for me, the strangest thing and the hardest thing to explain is how does it do what it does? Even if it is Russia, Jason, you mentioned, if Russia's having a hard time with Ukraine, if they had UFO technology, it would be lights out.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I think it's very improbable that this is human made, just because of the fact that even if we could make something that would go that fast, you still need somebody to operate it. And I don't think we've developed that bubble technology where physics don't apply. I don't think that exists on our planet.
Yeah. Totally agree with you. When you look at that footage and you look at the dynamics and stuff, it doesn't seem as if we could do anything at this stage in our technology. I mean, look at how technology has advanced over the last 50 years, from the big mobile phone and stuff, to the slim phones you've got now. Technology is ever progressing, not just in telecommunications, but in military technology as well. And like you said, if the Ukraine had that, then it would be lights out for Russia, because you would employ that. I mean, war is terrible in any conflict anywhere on planet Earth. Of course it is, but and it's sad that sometimes you have to use weapons of destruction to do that. The H bomb, the atom bomb. That ended Japan. The war in Japan. They knew they couldn't compete with that.
Yeah.
So we're living in terrible times. The problem is that, and I keep saying it, it's not just this technology, it's not just this incredible UFOs that we've seen flitting about the skies, it's the abduction phenomena. What bothers me is the fact that they're taking people from their homes, from their cars, and doing these horrible experiments on them. Now, they've been doing it for over 40, 50, 60 years. If it's a genetic thing, if they're trying to get some genetics out of us, well, surely they could do that in a hospital, stealthily go into a hospital, get sperm and ova. But then again, maybe they need the human being. Or is it, as some people have said, maybe these small greys are looking for our soul, what makes our soul tick, etc. Right now, I'm dealing with a lady in Edinburgh, and she's been abducted since she was 10 years of age. She's got marks all over her body. It's the early stage of this investigation, but she is terrified.
Yeah.
She is wanting answers. And whilst guys like me and guys like your good selves, we can do all the research we want, but we haven't got the answers, not yet, and that's the problem. It's so frustrating to know that we're dealing with a real phenomena here, but we can't get a handle on it. We can't stop them. We can have all these small cameras hidden in the bedroom to see if we can capture something, but it doesn't always work, as we know.
Yeah, I have somebody that I know that is within the U.S. military, and he told me just flat out when I said, is there really a threat narrative to this whole UFO thing? Because they seem to be quite docile with our military, meaning, almost like a laser pointer and a cat, just try to catch me type scenario.
That's a good way to put it. Yes.
Yeah. So, and I find that funny, but he said, I said, is there such a thing as a threat narrative? Because they haven't shown any hostility towards us. He goes, well, let me tell you something. He says, is it illegal for me to break into your house in the middle of the night, take you, do medical experiments, and then drop you back off feeling sick, ill, without your right and without consent? I said, well, yeah, that would be illegal. It goes, okay. So then it goes against our laws as humans. It goes against, it's an offense against us. And it's true. There's nothing we can do about it. The government's not going to come out and say, hey, actually, the abduction phenomenon is real. We can't do anything about it. Even if we found out that they were on a radar by the time, was it NORAD, that takes care of the stuff over our
Yeah, no,
airspace, that they would never
mm.
make it in time. So it is something that I think is not being mentioned with the UAP stuff that's going on in Washington. They're not talking about the abduction phenomenon. And if it's, that it seems like they're almost waiting to bring that forward to people,
Yeah, it's certainly, as I say, it's very, very serious for sure, very serious indeed. And you could take that to another level, because I've spoken to people who claim, and it's just a claim, that they have seen military personnel with these small greys, side by side. Now, I can't prove that. I'm only listening to their stories. But collectively, you take these stories from the UK, Britain, Canada, America, etc., then it would seem to suggest that something very real is going on. They may be in cahoots. Is it back engineering technology we're talking about here? It's bad enough these things are happening, but if they're happening at the behest of a military power, then even worse. That's even more concerning.
Yeah, well, that'd be a crime against its own people, wouldn't it? To be able
Yeah, yeah.
to, yeah, to witness what these things are doing to us. And obviously, there's a reason that they need you physically there, present, while they're doing these operations. And you're right, it could have something to do with our consciousness or our souls, whatever it is. But it's quite strange. It seems like there's
Are
a
you
mix
aware
there.
of? Yeah, are you aware of one of Scotland's biggest UFO abduction cases, the A70 case? Do you know
I'm
about this one?
not familiar with that, sir. No.
Shall I tell you?
Absolutely, yeah, please.
It's a safe place.
Okay.
It's a safe place.
Okay, again, it concerns two men from Edinburgh, the capital city of Scotland. And they had no interest in UFOs, as most people do. They were aware of it on television and newspapers, but it wasn't a big concern for them. Now, all that changed. All that changed on an August evening back in 1992. The two men were driving in their car from Edinburgh towards a small village called Tarbrax in West Lothian. And as they left the built-up city of Edinburgh with the big buildings, etc., this A70 road went further out, miles out, farmland, just farm to the left, to the right, lonely road, just fields and fields for miles, farmers' fields. So they're driving down this road. It was about 10:30 at night. And as they were approaching a blind bend, your classic flying saucer was about 50, 60 feet above the ground, above the road. It was like three tiers, a black, shiny, three-tiered disc-shaped object. And I went, ho, ho, what's this? They knew that this was not a conventional helicopter or aircraft of any description. And so if you can imagine, this is the UFO my hand here, this is the car. And as the car was directly underneath this hovering object, it emitted a heavy, silver, shimmering curtain of mist, and it hit the car. And as soon as that effect hit the car, both men were enveloped in total and inky blackness. They couldn't see their hands in front of their face. They couldn't see the dashboard of the car. They couldn't see each other. Gary, one of the witnesses, says, are we dead? Is this death? We don't know how long, but suddenly they regained their sight. The car's on the other side of the road, and they had to struggle violently to pull it back onto that side of the road. They reached their destination, knocked on the occupant's door, and the lady says, "What time do you call this?" "What? You're an hour and a half late." The journey should only have taken 30 minutes, and they were an hour and a half past that 30-minute deadline. Now, they went into the house and said to the family, "You'll never believe what we've just seen." Now, that night and subsequent nights thereafter, they had these strange dreams of these small grey creatures, which we, as we know, call the greys, the large pear-shaped head, the black inky almond-shaped eyes. Then they found scars on their body, scars that previously were not there. Where did they come from?
Right.
Now, as I said, they didn't know much about UFOs, and Gary, one of the witnesses, said, well, who do you turn to? Who do you go to with these things? Do you go to the police? Do you go to your doctor? Who do you go to? Cutting a long story short, he went to his local library and he went to the UFOs and paranormal section, and he picked out a book by a famous British authoress, Jenny Randalls. And my address was in the end of the book, and he went, maybe I should call this chap Malcolm Robinson. Long story short, if he called me, I listened to him on the phone, and I says, would you and Colin, that was the other person in the car, would you and Colin like to come to my house and talk about it? Yeah, sure. Then I said to them, would you be happy to go under hypnotic regression just to see if perhaps something else may have happened that night? Both men says, Malcolm, we'll try anything. We need to know what happened. Malcolm, even our wives don't believe what went on, you know. We're having trouble with our workmates. They're just laughing at us.
Yeah.
So what I'm about to tell you right now is what happened under hypnosis. The conscious recall was only ever seen a physical craft, the car going under it, the big light, bang, blackness. That's a conscious recall. Under hypnosis, they said some of it tallies with European abductions, some of it doesn't. They claimed they were stopped on the road. Several small grey creatures, 3.5 to 4 feet tall, approached the car, took the men out of the car and placed, I know this sounds bizarre, placed one of the men on a floating stretcher. Nobody was holding it, free floating stretcher. They were taken on board this object. They were stripped naked and subjected to some form of medical or clinical procedure. Gary found himself in a flat raised table, and he says, Malcolm, I couldn't move. I could not move a muscle. I could only move my eyes. And then suddenly I saw this can-shaped device. It was about 3 feet tall, come off the floor of the machine, come up to about my head height, and a lever went up like that with 2 red like LED lights, and it started to spin around my head, making a noise. This is, I don't know what it did. I haven't a clue. Then he also saw above him this black kind of lens-shaped object, just free-floating and oscillating. Again, he couldn't move. He didn't know what was going on. And then he also remembers these 2 small grey beings at the foot of this flat bed thing. And he says they had this pendulum, like a pendulum, and they were moving up and down his body. And then he says, well, he didn't want to tell me what happened next. I says, you've got to tell me. You've got to tell me, no matter how infinitesimal it is. Tell me what you saw. Well, I looked down. I could only move my eyes, Malcolm. This is what he's saying. I could only look, and I looked down on the floor, and I saw a naked female about 16, 17 years of age. She had her knees up under her chin. She had her arms around her knees, and she gently turned her head and looked in my direction, and tears were running down her face. He says, Malcolm, I'll never, ever forget that, and as long as I live. Another thing he saw on board this craft was he says, it was like a pool of a man's shaving gel just starting to bubble up on the floor of this room, circular room, no instrumentation or anything, just this flat table. And coming out of this was a small grey being. And I says, Gary, in the drawings, it looks like ribs. I'm not aware of any of these creatures having ribs. And he said a very interesting thing. He says, well, maybe it was heavy folds of skin, which was interesting. Another thing that was not common with European abduction reports was underneath the eyes, the black eyes of these creatures was green, red, and black lines under their eyes. Now I know it sounds bizarre, many cases are, and it absolutely traumatized them. Now, it's a long story, so I'll be brief. So, as I said to you, his wife did not believe him until one night. One night I took a phone call in my house, and it was Gary's wife. Is that you, Malcolm? Yes. How can I help you? And she says she was lying in bed. Gary was next to her. He was sleeping. She says, Malcolm, I wasn't sleeping. I had read a book, closed the book, put it on the bedside table, switched the bedside light off, and within 20 seconds, cold, clammy hands grabbed small hands, like childlike hands, grabbed her ankles and pulled her forcibly down the bed. So where her head was on the pillow, it's now down there. And she saw these three creatures at the foot of the bed wobbling into the wall and disappearing. And she says, Malcolm, I'm so sorry. I firmly believe my husband now.
Yeah.
And this is just one of many cases coming out of Scotland, similar to some degree to Canada and also America.
What's concerning too is that these crafts are designed to have experiment with us in it. Like people go in and there's like an operation room or a table of some sort, but every one of these crafts seem to have a room that is designed for medical procedures on humans. Like the table is human sized, there's humans always involved. And like you mentioned, that 16, 17-year-old girl that's crying, even when you look back at the Berkshire incidents, when it's going from city to city abducting people, I'm not surprised that that still is happening today, that it's, whatever their agenda is, they're going from, especially in Scotland and England, everything's so close together. So it is possible that they do that in that section as well. Now, one of the questions that I have for you is that usually in the UK, the tall whites or UK or Europe, the tall whites are predominant over there. While over here in North America, it's usually the grays that we have. So have you had any experience or anything like that with the tall whites, or is it
Nordic
I'll be
blondes, I
perfectly
think you
honest with
call
you.
them, right? Nordic blondes.
Nordic
Nordic
blondes? Yeah.
blondes, they are in the kind of historic lore of British ufology. We have a few cases of these Nordic blondes, these beautiful kind of Norwegian type people with a long blonde hair, kind of George Adamski-esque kind of people, who George saw, sorry. But that's in the past. We don't seem to be dealing with
Okay.
any of these Nordic-like creatures or whatever they may be now. Mostly it's the small grey beings that we're seeing. People often ask me, well, Malcolm, don't forget, we also have these reptilian-like creatures and stuff, and the insectoids, they call them. We may well have that, but here in Scotland and in England, I personally haven't dealt with any of those cases, so I cannot comment on them. I'm not saying they don't happen, they may well do, but certainly I can only speak about cases that I've personally dealt with. But again, there's no denying it. They are in this historic UFO lore. Yeah, the Nordics, it's insectoids, reptilians, etc.
Yeah, we don't hear of them as often. I've had a few people, or we've had a few people on the podcast that have talked about the reptilians, usually being in cahoots with the grays. It seems like the grays are almost like the worker bees for these things. These things are a little bit
Yeah.
higher up the chain, but again, it's nothing that we can prove, or it's just stories from the abductees that really we're basing ourselves off.
Yeah, there was I think an historic legend. I'm not sure if it was Ireland or Scotland, but there was a group known as the Tuatha De Danann, and they had, some people thought that they may not have been from this earth either, or they had information or technology that superseded everybody else at that time. So there's been recordings of this going back hundreds, if not thousands of years too. Whether they're transient, whether these are just one of many civilizations, and unless there was something interesting enough to keep you coming back over and over again, sometimes it might be a one and done. You never know, right? Maybe they're on to something bigger and better than us.
Yeah, and I always said that, people say, well, how are they getting here? Are they traveling faster than light? People say that you can't, move faster than light. Yeah, that's possibly our technology. If we're dealing with something well in advance of our own technology, we can't comprehend that. It's like Christopher Columbus going into the Nautilus, the big submarine, etc. And they're not denying that we're dealing with something very superior. They may well have bases under the oceans, perhaps. We know that there are many sightings coming from near the island of Puerto Rico. And here in Wales and Great Britain, there's some sightings coming into the water and exiting the waters around the British Isles as well. So who knows? We know more about the surface of the moon than we do what's under our planet's oceans as well. It could be dimensional. At my point of life right now, I tend to be in the camp of Jacques Vallée. I do think it's a dimensional thing. Remember what I said a moment ago about the Scottish case where this UFO solid 1 minute dematerialized and came solid the next minute. We're dealing with something dimensional. It could, is it extraterrestrial as well? It could be any of a number of things. But for me, it's definitely dimensional. They're coming in. It could be a wormhole. It could be a number of things. But yeah, it's all speculation, isn't it? Does anybody really have the answer?
And it could be, like you mentioned, it could be the multiple things. You can have a extraterrestrial visitation. You can have interdimensional visitations, like all the crafts, even the craft that you mentioned that had those was the balls with the spikes on it
Yeah.
that came rolling out.
Uh-huh.
You don't hear that often. It almost sounds like there's different species coming in and visiting and taking looks at stuff. Most of the time, they leave people intact. And like I mentioned, that with the abduction, they always return people. It's not they just float you out the air docks in space and say, "Okay, well, thank you for your time." The even when I was talking with Terry Lovegood or I forgot Lovelace or yeah, something along those lines, he was mentioning that as he was screaming on the table, the leader, whatever the medical examiner alien, just looked at him. He says, "Oh, be quiet. You know we always put you back." And it's weird just to hear that, like how we're supposed to subconsciously know that we'll be okay after these experiences. Like it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I remember in the A70 case, Gary, who was lying naked in this flat table, he couldn't even speak, so he was shouting out and he said, Why? Why do you want me? Why are you doing this? One word he got, one word, and that was sanctuary. Why would the aliens want sanctuary? Why would they want sanctuary? And he says, Malcolm, I swear to God that I heard it clear as a bell and a kind of metallic kind of sound in my head. Sanctuary, they want that. So I don't know. I mean, we can only, when I come on podcasts, it's just great for me to provide an opportunity to inform an audience who probably doesn't know our cases about what's happening here in the UK and Scotland as a whole, because it's important. It's a big ufological jigsaw. That's what ufology is. Somebody in maybe Ottawa may have a part there. It might fit with something in Dumfries and Galloway in Scotland, and that nests fine and it helps build this ufological jigsaw. But we're not any nearer. Sadly, we're not any nearer to finding out what is the raison d'etre, what is going on here. Did they see us? Is planet Earth but a zoo? And so what we're seeing is they're not taking things from us, but they're putting things in us. They are the gods, so to speak, that Erkin van Daniken spoke about. Is it, is planet Earth a zoo? Did we come from apes? Did we come from the primordial soup with comet strikes containing the nucleus of life? Or were we put here by another race? Again, pure speculation,
Yeah, even in the Zimbabwe case, when the children were saying that they were getting messages, they were saying that don't get too technologically involved. Like that's the message that they were getting from these things, that technology will be probably the end of us. Well, the thing is with technology, with humans, it's always how can we use it to kill somebody, right? Like every technology we have that comes down, leaks down from the military was originally designed to kill people, or how can we use this to, limit our threats that we have out there? And really, I understand that because with the nuclear facilities, now I don't know about England or Great Britain, but you guys have had your own sightings at nuclear facilities as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And that to me is just a sign that we're dealing with something that we shouldn't have. Louis and I always joke around that it's kind of like toddlers running around with scissors and they're just like slapping the scissors out of our hand saying, no, you're not old enough or wise enough to use these. And that's kind of the impression that we get.
Well, to some degree, I hope that's true. And what I mean by that is, a lot of UFOs, as you quite rightly said, have been seen over missile silos and switching off the Minuteman missile, etc. And so if they're trying to stop us from really going too far, well, I guess that's got to be a good thing, I don't know why they can't stop coming into wars like what's happening just now in the Ukraine, with Russia, but maybe that's not their part of the plan. There is a plan. Of course, there's a plan with these. It's an alien agenda, but certainly it's not stopping coming in to stop wars, etc., or famine for want of a better word, And famine is rife throughout parts of the world, as we know. So clearly there's not something. I mean, this technology, this superior technology, these advanced aliens have, could clearly eradicate poverty, could clearly eradicate this famine, etc. And maybe they could give us health, far better health, but that's not part of the plan, it would appear. It's not part of their plan.
Yeah.
It's amazing how similar some of these cases are. Like that A70 one you just described, I just kept hearing reminders of the Calvin Parker case, and we had him on our show a couple months ago. It was almost exactly the same. You're in a place you feel safe. All of a sudden, you see a craft or lights. Next thing you know, you're on the ship. And most of these memories come back through hypnotherapy and regression therapy. Being on a flat table, having a little device pop up and kind of, I think Calvin said it looked like a deck of playing cards. It popped out of the ceiling, scanned his head, and then zoop, it took right back off where it came from. And having that ESP communication with these entities as well. And then being brought back, having physical trauma, like he, had blood on his clothing and didn't feel right. And even when we speak with people who've done a lot of research on this whole field, like, for example, George Knapp, we interviewed him about his book, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. And he explained that it's a whole wide variety of not only phenomenon, like as crazy as it is, Bigfoots, UFOs, cryptids, blue orbs, all this stuff. For some reason, they all seem to exist in the same world, whether it's dimensional or not. But the people that seem to interact with these things, a lot of them reported physical mal effects, autoimmune diseases that were so obscure and rare that almost nobody got them. And now they're occurring with frequency. And he even mentioned the hitchhiker effect, that when he got too close to the paranormal realm or whatever the hell's going on at Skinwalker Ranch, they would bring that home with them and their family, and other people would have spooky things happen. So it's such a deep level now. We were nuts and bolts ufologists looking for metal craft, and UFO is now UAP, because it's not just a flying object, it's phenomenon, it's anomalous, and it's stranger than our brains can comprehend, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would also, even though I firmly believe that we're dealing with some form of non-human intelligence, I would always say to my audience when I give lectures that when we're using hypnosis, we have to be very, very careful using hypnosis in a UFO abduction scenario, because people can lie or please a hypnotherapist. There may be something called cryptonesia, which they, as a child, I read a story about a UFO in a comic book, and it's went right to the back of the mind. And once under hypnosis, it's like the sluice gates of the mind lifts up that barrier, and all these recall come over. Now, that's not to say that what Leonard Stringfield did and many other, hypnotherapists and ufologists doing a bad thing. Absolutely not. We need this. We need to be very careful. Nowadays, there's so many programs on television about UFOs, etc. It used to be maybe 2 in 10 saw a program maybe 20 years ago. Now it's about 8 or 9 in 10 seeing the same program. They may not believe in that, but that's in their minds now. So if they have seen something, then they may recall that, what they saw on the telly. And for every 5 people who have seen a bona fide UFO, there maybe be 3 people will say, what? I don't know, I never saw anything. So 5 people in a part, and I've seen this before, 5 people have been at a UFO sighting, and 2 have seen the UFO and 3 didn't. Why is that? Possibly because maybe you have to be on a certain frequency, a certain level. It's like the old radios here in the United Kingdom, BBC Radio 1, you tuned it, then you got BBC Radio 2, you're scanning through the wavelengths. So perhaps the more psychically attuned you are, more psychically aware, then you're in that frequency. You will see these lights in the sky. Just like the dogs and the cats or animals are well attuned to hear and see different frequencies and vibrations, maybe just some of us can see this. Getting back to the Pentagon UFO files, though, maybe these things are flying about and they can't be seen all the time because it's different light frequencies, and they may be there all the time. We don't see them.
That's the thing too. What did you think about the newest development in the United States with the Congress holding the hearings? Were you pleased at it? Were you sort of disappointed? Because some people are on the fence. Some people were happy with what came out. Some people were not. At least they're not avoiding the subject altogether, but I thought it was kind of funny where they're saying we want to be clear with the public and totally open and transparent, but most of the stuff will be classified, which I thought
so,
yeah.
I mean, back in I think it was 2001, where the press club disclosures, you had all these military and all that saying, I saw this and I saw that. I went, yes, at last we've got, people, not just the wee man in the street, but these recognizable military people with stories to tell. This is it. And it was
Yeah.
yesterday's news, and they went on to other things, and we've had other disclosure kind of meetings since then. And then obviously the one you've just spoken about. What do I think about it? Yes, I agree with you in the sense that it's great that they're speaking about it. The military are speaking about it. Whether they're pressurised into speaking about it, who knows? But at least they are. And at least they're now providing the American and Canadian public an opportunity to be upfront with this. I agree also that there'll be a suppression lid on that. That's all the good documents there, or what we will see. Below that lid is the gems, the fantastic gems that you and I will probably never see, and that's a shame.
Well, they mentioned too that whenever anything happens, they'd be the ones that would show up and get the tapes and all that information. But somebody was already doing that before them. When you hear about the Nimitz incident, two civilian-looking people came on this helicopter, took the footage, took everything. So my question with them was thinking, okay, are they competing against that organization now? That whatever that under, that black operation that they got going on, are they going to be competing against those people? Because keep in mind, the Air Force hasn't said, and pardon my English here, shit about anything in related to the UAP subject. And I think that's a huge piece of the puzzle that's missing is the Air Force, because if anybody's going to know what's going on, it's NASA and the Air Force, but you hear nothing from them.
That's because NASA stands for never a straight answer. NASA.
I like it. I like it.
But yeah, I mean, it could be compartmentalized. Maybe the American Air Force only knows so much, and then there's people above them who's got a key for a door. So no, we're not giving you that key. That door's locked to you.
Yeah.
And it's the same with the army in certain departments. That certain things are locked away from. I mean, I thought when Jimmy Carter was, he was going to release files, as was Reagan, and he promised that, and it never happened. And that other chap with the ginger hair, what's his name?
Oh, I'm bad with names.
Kennedy.
I'm bad with names.
No, just recently.
Recently.
Not
I'm bad with
doesn't-
names. Yeah, I couldn't help you there.
Here in the UK, obviously we've been fighting for many years to get under the Freedom of Information Act, many pre-classified document files from Whitehall to be released, and they have been released, but dribs and drabs. And a lot of these pages, paragraphs are heavily blacked out. Why? Now, some people have said, well, maybe it's an address, which is fine, a name and address. You don't want people to know that. That's fine. But no, some pages are totally blacked out. Come on.
Yeah.
That's not addresses. No way.
No. And they're like, here's the information that you seek. Well, everything's redacted, for crying out loud. There's no information to have. And all the information they do provide is stuff that we already are aware of, right? But we're starting to see some momentum in Canada as well. As recently, Louis and I have been trying to reach out to some of these politicians like Larry Maguire here in Canada, that's really pushing the agenda for like what's going on with UAPs and our military and our nuclear facilities. Like, we know that we are having the same experience as people in the UK and in the States. This is a global issue, but it's nice to see Canada sort of step up as well and saying, hey, we got this problem too. It's not just the United States. We got big issues in Canada as well. We see them all the time.
That's why I'm reading this book just now, and all about Canada's UFO Files, Shag Harbor, etc. Some wonderful, wonderful cases coming from Canada, and because it's all about education. You've got to immerse yourself in this ufological umbrella, and there'll be a lot of nonsense out there, but it's like a big sieve. Shake all that away, and you've still got these kernels of truth that won't go through that grid, because that's the real deal. You and I and Louis would not be involved in the subject if we didn't honestly believe that there's something there to look at. And even though there's hoaxes and all the rest of it, there's still enough validity there to keep us three going,
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the only way we're actually going to get real disclosure and the kind of disclosure that we want, like you said before, they had those National Press Club meetings in 2001, feels like disclosure, and the next day they're on to something else. I kind of felt the same way with the New York Times article, the Tic Tac video. This is the first time the U.S. government acknowledged, we don't know what this thing is, and here's a video of it. Why are we not jumping in up and down the streets? Because it's still hidden, it's suppressed. You know, we were talking a few episodes ago before these house panel meetings, and Jason says, "Hey, what do you think? Are we going to get the raw goods?" And I said, "Listen, this is the same establishment that's been like lying to us essentially for 70 years. Now you think they're
Yes.
actually going to admit that, yeah, we've been blowing smoke and sorry about that. You would lose all faith in your government if they ever did that. The acknowledgement itself is damning and incriminating. So it's not going to come from them. And as you mentioned, even if you do file a freedom of information request, you get these redacted documents, and some stuff's been classified for 50 or 60 years. No one says it's ever going to come out. And it's not like there's a certain time expiry that eventually it's all going to come out. No, they're going to keep this stuff hidden. And I think the only thing I find positive coming out of the movement are people that are civilian based, scientists, people that are inventing new machinery that can observe and record different wavelengths, different frequencies. We're going to catch the bloody things ourselves on tape and provide our own evidence, because, you know, whatever the government has, they can't release it, because then they have to also admit that we've had this for years and haven't done anything positive with it. You know, if they do have UFO technology, it's just been used to try to weaponize. It's never been used to benefit mankind, improve our health, our consciousness, or anything that we could have used it for. It's been held and kept in secret. So I think the only thing positive are movements like this, people like us dedicated to the field, and just won't shut up about it, because, like you said, those kernels of truth, there's enough there that, yeah, you could have the 98% of explainable phenomenon. That's fine. Makes total sense that most of it is explainable, but it's that 2% that keeps us going. So credit to everybody
Yeah,
in the field that's for that.
absolutely. I totally agree with you. You know, that was a good point you made there, Louis, about somebody, maybe there's an entrepreneur, a wonderful educated guy who made the design and this piece of equipment that can see into those spectrums. You know, like you said, can build something that can see stuff that we can't see. And that would be fantastic. Now, the skeptics would still probably say, well, you've made that on computer, you've done this on computer. That's fine, because as we know, a lot of UFOs can be made by computer to look, oh, wow, that looks really good. But the same technology, thank goodness, can be applied to any fake UFO video or fake photograph. With photographs, you can see the wee thin supporting string, etc. I mean, I've said before, we're living in the Steven Spielberg age of DreamWorks Laboratory. Anything can be manipulated onto screen to look fantastical, but the same process can be proved and be applied to say, well, we've done all our tests, but we still can't explain this. But I'm with you on that one. Yeah, maybe there's some guy out there who might build a machine that can see different spectrums that we can't see, and that would be great.
Well, we chatted with Dave Mason last week from that film, A Tear in the Sky, and he was exactly that entrepreneur, inventor, genius. And he figured out a way to take, you know, a spectrograph. So you look at a light in the sky, it converts that into a waveform of sound. So there's a lot more identifying properties in a waveform. So, you know, a 747 will always have that characteristic sound, essentially, because he's taking light, turning it into sound. So it's a way of filtering the 98% of explainable phenomenon. And, you know, if you were to capture something, it would measure the radiation, the depth of field, all that stuff. It would be a good way and a scientific way with documented evidence, rather than just, I saw a light in the sky. No, I saw a light. It's this type of waveform. This was the kilohertz or gigahertz that it's in. It's to provide those skeptic minded people the raw science that they're looking for. And so those people actually exist right now and are making those strides in technology. So I think that's super, super amazing that, you know, I know there's no money in this stuff for most industries to invest, but if you have a well-off genius who's really into this, that might be all it takes to really spur this thing on.
Yeah. Encourage other scientists to,
Again, that would be great if we can get all these people who can build this stuff. And then if we've got some valuable information, have a big conference somewhere, invite all the top people from the Air Force and say, well, this is maybe 5-10 years in the making, guys. We've got the top guys with all these devices. Here's what we've got. We're presenting you the best UFO footage, etc. you got to take this more seriously. That would be something perhaps for the future when we get there with these type of machines. But yeah, fantastic.
And repeatable scientific experiments, right? Like that's a nice
Absolutely.
thing about the Terror in the Sky movie was that it was a repeatable over the course of a few days. They could repeat the experiments and they got good footage out
Yeah.
of it. And that's the main thing is finding out where are these things at. If they're in the middle of the ocean, find the spot and then just keep there for a couple of weeks and keep figuring out. Now before we close, Louis, do you have any final questions for our guests?
Yeah, so we're mentioning different people in the field and, prominent ufologists, Canadian, American, all the rest. I wanted to ask you, just in your own, the UK world of ufologists, there is somebody very popular in North America, but I find that he gets a bit of bad press in the UK. And I'm just personally curious. So we're chatting about Nick Pope. Now, I know he's appeared on 1,000,001 shows. I don't have an opinion, good or bad. I've never met Nick. I've never had a chance to interview him. I see it kind of from both ends. But here's sort of my opinion. Correct me if I'm wrong. I want to get some more information on that. So, Nick Pope, according to his own declaration, worked for the UK Ministry of Defense. He worked in a certain section of the UK Ministry of Defense where he had some access to UFO clandestine programs, that type of thing. Now, I see he gets a lot of bad press, people saying, well, he's not a real ufologist. He's bolstered his own resume, so to speak. And then I see the other side of it where people say, well, he never actually said he ran the department, he ran the program. He was a desk clerk and was later promoted to a slightly higher position, but he's never actually claimed that he's knows more than he has, or he was, one of two people that got some special info. So maybe you can provide some clarification. What do you think about Nick Pope? And what should we know? Is he the real deal, or is he more controversial than we think?
Well, my views on Nick Pope, because I know him very personally before he went over to America. I've had many a dinner with Nick Pope and Stanton Friedman and various conferences, etc.
Nice.
I believe he's the real deal. I think a lot of people in the UK have a lot of problems with Nick Pope, whether that's jealousy, whether it's something else. Yes, he did. Nick Pope had a small part in Whitehall. We know that he got promoted. Nick told me when he went into that desk, he says, Malcolm, I thought it was a lot of rubbish. I was there for low-flying aircraft. It was just, all these complaints, and then people would give me all these UFO reports, and I wanted to prove what a load of nonsense it was. And then he says, Malcolm, even I was knocking on doors and no, you can't come in this door. Doesn't matter. You go about your own business. He says, I was stonewalled. I was stonewalled. So me personally, I honestly believe Nick, yes, he has enhanced his reputation by going on TV shows. He's never off TV shows, bless him.
Yeah.
But that's good because it lets people know that he knows his subject and he's getting all these wonderful stories out about UFOs. He's making people who would never set up about UFOs. What was that? Listen, wow. He's bringing people into this subject. So I have no problem with Nick Pope. Other people in the UK have. I haven't. He's a wonderful guy. And I'll probably get pelters for saying that, but I like the guy. I think
we were having this conversation last night, Jason and I said, listen, it's been bugging me for a couple of weeks because I saw a post on Facebook and it was a UK UFO group and it was a picture of somebody receiving an award and Nick Pope was beside him. And the caption said, there's a very well-respected, very intelligent ufologist, and there's also Nick Pope. And I thought, you know what? I've seen enough of him speak and heard him, and I don't think he's ever made a wrong step. I've never once heard him say, I was the leader of the program, or I got, access to this and nobody else did. He's not bolstering saying I'm the, the messiah of ufology, or I'm the biggest expert. He's humble. He's extremely educated, whether you're talking about ancient stories or military stories or quantum physics. It doesn't seem to matter what the topic. He's extremely intelligent and offers just not even his opinion. He just says, researchers are talking about this, some people are saying this, there have been reports of this. It's very non-biased. Like, I really like the guy. I think he's the real deal. And I said to Jason last night, I said, you know what? I'm going to take the opportunity today just to ask, because from what it's worth, and again, I don't know Nick, I don't have a bias one way or the other. I think he's the real deal. And if we see somebody getting some bad press, I wouldn't mind calling it out just to see what's what. Am I brainwashed, or is he not as bad as some people are making him out to be?
Yeah, I mean,
So thank you for.
I know the people who in the UK who don't like him, but I'm not going to say who they are on this show.
Sure.
That picture you referred to there, Louis, was actually placed on my Facebook page, which I was none too happy about, but that's another story. Bottom line is, Nick Pope's fine. He's a great guy, and he's an intelligent guy. He's getting the story out in the television. Why not? Okay, he's made a name for himself. He's probably getting lots of dollars for doing all the shows. So what? As long as he's truthful, and getting those facts out about ufology across the world, no problems.
Lou Elizondo had that show on History Channel, which is the only reason we know his name in the first place. He's not doing that for free either. So I don't begrudge anybody making a living. Again, as you said, as long as it's truthful, they're not fabricating things to make it either more interesting or to prolong their tenure. Like, you better keep me going on these things because I'm always finding new stuff. As long as you're not doing that, I don't have a problem with anybody making money, writing books. You're going to make a living. So if you can make a living and further this investigative, body of work and provide quality stuff to it, you're enhancing the value of the subject, not detracting from it. So
as long as you don't form a cult and make people wear white sneakers and drink the Kool-Aid, I think you're good, right? Yeah. Malcolm, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. Are you working on a new book or anything like that as of late?
I'm working on another book. Yes, it's to do with a Scottish case which involves over 3, 4, 5 dozen small greys seen in a field terrorising a family. It's a true story, and that's the one I'm working on just now. But Jason, it's been a pleasure speaking to your good self and Louis there. You're doing a marvelous job, sir. You really are. And,
thank you.
We really appreciate that.
A few stories. It's great,
Yeah, well, when the book is finished, shoot me an email, and we'll definitely have you back on. It's been a pleasure and an honor for us as well, sir.
Thank you very much.
Before we close off tonight, we just want to thank all of our listeners. We've been getting a lot of strong love mail. We don't get any hate mail. I love that. There's trolls everywhere, and we don't get any trolls. So I think we have one of the most loyal listener bases out there. We're doing our best to bring you quality guests. There's a few episodes where we recorded ourselves because we didn't have anybody of a certain caliber that we wanted to bring to our people. So we have a shout out. We've been doing this a little bit lately. We're going to give a shout out to one of our biggest fans, Candace Dawn Breeze. She's been a fan of the show since day one.
Absolutely.
Helped us promote. She posts our show on her own page, and she's a big fan. So we do want to say thank you, Candace. We really appreciate it. We hear you. We feel the love, and right back at you.
Are you paying attention?